Was 300,000 a month not enough? My grandmother asked, standing in the hospital doorway while I held my newborn daughter against my chest in the same faded gray sweatshirt I had worn for 2 nights. I thought I had misheard her. The room still smelled like antiseptic and warm plastic and the sweet, heavy milk smell of a baby who had only been in the world for a day and a half. My daughter Lila was sleeping on me with one fist tucked under her chin. There was a paper bracelet around her wrist, a hospital bassinet by the window, and a bill folded face down on the side table because I had already looked at it 3 times, and every time I did, my heart started beating in my throat. My grandmother Eleanor Whitmore did not look at the bassinet first. She looked at me. She looked at my sweatshirt, at the washed-out knees of my leggings, at the cheap overnight bag by the chair, at the way I had moved the billing envelope under a magazine like I could hide money by hiding paper. Then she asked it again, slower this time. Was 300,000 a month not enough? I stared at her. My throat was dry. I had not slept more than an hour at a stretch in 2 days. My body still felt open, tender, unfamiliar. I was too exhausted to pretend I understood what she was saying. I said, "Grandma, what are you talking about?" She took one more step into the room. Her face had gone very still, which was worse than anger on her. Anger burned hot and fast. Stillness meant she was already building structure around what she had seen. "I have wired $300,000 on the first business day of every month since your wedding," she said. "I assumed you were choosing to live simply. I assumed you were building your life carefully. I did not assume this." She let her eyes move over me again. I looked down at Lila, then back at her. And I said the only true thing in the room. I never received a single dollar. There are moments when the world does not explode. It just shifts a fraction of an inch and never fits together the same way again. That was one of them. My grandmother did not gasp. She did not say my name in that soft, pitying tone people use when they want to climb inside your grief and make a home there. She reached into her bag, took out her phone, and called someone. "Diane," she said when the line connected. "I need you at St. Vincent's right now. Bring everything you can pull in the next hour." Then she hung up. If you were me holding your newborn and hearing that number for the first time, would you ask one more question or would you break right there? I did not break. Not then. I think shock sometimes looks less like panic and more like obedience. I sat there and kept one hand on my daughter's back and listened to my own pulse in my ears and tried to count. 300,000 a month. We had been married for 30 months. That was $9 million. $9 million, and I had spent the last 4 months trimming grocery lists, telling nurses I did not need upgraded options, and doing overnight inventory audits for a regional pharmacy chain twice a week in my 3rd trimester because my husband kept telling me cash flow is tight. I met Ethan Mercer at a fundraising dinner in Greenwich. He had the exact kind of face that made older women call him polished, and younger women call him safe. He worked in private capital advisory, which meant he had rich clients, careful suits, and the kind of vocabulary that made money sound like weather. Cycles, exposure, timing, liquidity. Everything sounded temporary when Ethan said it. Even fear. My grandmother had liked him, or at least had not objected to him. At the time, that felt like approval. And to me, approval from Eleanor Whitmore had the weight of a bank guarantee. She had built Whitmore Storage Group with my grandfather when they were both young, then multiplied it into a holding company with industrial properties, medical buildings, and enough quiet wealth that no one in our family ever had to perform it out loud. She was not flashy. She wore cashmere that looked ordinary and drove a 10-year-old Range Rover and signed 6-figure checks with the same expression she used to order tea. When Ethan proposed, I thought I was marrying a man who understood stability the way I did. Calm, private, not dramatic. I see now that what I mistook for steadiness was actually control with a pleasant face. The first move came as a kindness. A joint household account, he said, would make everything easier. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, baby savings when the time came. One place for everything. One system. One dashboard. He said he was better at monitoring timing and fees and movement between accounts, and I believed him, because he sounded like a man who already knew the answer to problems I had not even seen yet. At first it was small. Notifications went to his phone because he was setting up autopay. Password changes went through his email, because he had built the account interface. Big transfers were easier if he handled them because his bank had higher limits and better tools and fewer holds. All of it came dressed as efficiency. Then came the next phase. I would ask a question and he would answer around it. I would say, "Can I see what is left after the mortgage clears this month?" He would say, "I have got it covered. Do not stress yourself out over timing." I would say, "Why did the card get declined at the baby store?" He would say, "Fraud flag." "I already fixed it." "Use the other one for now." I would say, "Are we actually okay?" He would smile and kiss my forehead and say, "We are fine. I just need you to stop thinking like a single person and start thinking like a married one. Cash moves differently now." That line stayed with me for months. Cash moves differently now. It sure did. By the time I was 6 months pregnant, I had already started scaling myself down, not because he ordered me to. Ethan was too smart for that. He let me come to it myself. He let me be grateful for less. I bought store-brand vitamins. I put back the soft maternity pajamas and kept wearing my old, oversized shirts. I stopped ordering anything extra at restaurants if we even went out at all. I pretended my back pain was manageable. I told myself women did harder things every day and did not complain. Then came the overnight inventory work. A former coworker knew someone who managed audit teams for a pharmacy chain. The job was mindless counting stock after closing, scanning shelves standing too long under cold lights. It paid fast. I told Ethan I had picked up a little side work until things evened out. He looked impressed. He said, "That is one of the things I admire about you. You do not fall apart when life gets tight." I remember that sentence now, and think I must have been standing in front of him with a price tag still on my dignity, while I was counting blood pressure cuffs and prenatal vitamins at 2 in the morning. Ethan was maintaining appearance. That was the phrase he liked. Appearance, presence, positioning. There were dinners that mattered, client weekends that mattered, rounds of golf that mattered, gifts that mattered, all of them apparently too strategic to question. Then my mother-in-law, Vivian Mercer, began dropping by more often. Vivian Mercer had perfected the art of sounding gracious while making every sentence an insult if you replayed it later. She would walk into my kitchen and say, "Oh good, you are keeping things simple." Or pregnancy can make some women let themselves go, but at least Ethan is not shallow. She always wore cream and camel and jewelry that looked inherited even when it obviously was not. She had opinions about nursery paint, breastfeeding, stroller brands, whether I should go natural, whether I should schedule an induction, whether I should stop working entirely, whether I should maybe work more because idle women think too much. She never yelled. She curated pressure. Packages started arriving for Ethan almost daily. Shoes, watches, shirts, once a leather weekender bag that cost more than what I had earned in a month of late-night audits. When I asked, he said one of his clients had given it to him after a closing. Another time, Vivian showed up with a new bracelet, slim and bright and expensive. She laughed and said she had gotten lucky at an estate sale. Everything had an explanation. Every explanation was just clean enough to slide past suspicion. When the life you think is struggling turns out to be staged, do you confront him right then, or do you keep listening long enough to learn how deep it goes? Subscribe now if you like revenge stories that start quietly and hit hard. I kept listening. I kept telling myself, marriage meant uneven seasons. I kept thinking maybe this was what grown-up partnership looked like, one person taking more weight in one direction, the other carrying it in another. Ethan carried the language. I carried the consequences. There was a Tuesday in my 8th month that I cannot stop thinking about now. I was standing in the grocery store near the dairy section, deciding between 2 cans of formula samples I wanted to stash away even though the baby was not here yet. I had a calculator open on my phone. I had already put back 2 things. A stranger bumped my cart and apologized, and I smiled like nothing was wrong. That same night, Ethan posted a photo from a steakhouse in Manhattan with 2 clients and a bottle of wine on the table that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. I did not even fight with him when he got home. I just asked how the trip had gone. He said productive. That was the whole answer. When I hit 36 weeks, my doctor told me to stop doing the audits. My blood pressure was climbing. My ankles were swollen. I said I would. Then I picked up one last shift, because the electric bill had arrived, and the number made me lightheaded. That was the life I thought I was protecting. A marriage under pressure, a husband doing his best, a temporary constriction we would laugh about later. Then Lila came early. My labor started on a stormy Thursday, and ended almost 20 hours later with a daughter who came into the world furious and beautiful, and very much alive. I had never loved anything that fast. It felt like my bones knew her before my mind did. I also remember staring at the list of optional postpartum upgrades, and quietly declining anything that sounded like a luxury. Better room package. Lactation follow-up at home. Additional night nurse support. I kept hearing Ethan's voice in my head. We just need to get through this quarter. My grandmother walked into that room and shattered the quarter, the year, the whole lie. About 40 minutes after her call, Ethan and Vivian came in. I knew the sound of his steps before I looked up. Confident, measured, almost cheerful. He was carrying flowers. Vivian had a pale blue gift bag and a coat over one arm. They came in smiling the way people do when they expect to enter a scene they still control. Then Ethan saw my grandmother. His smile did not disappear all at once. It held for a beat too long, which was somehow worse. Vivian recovered first. She always did. "Eleanor," she said. What a surprise. My grandmother did not look at her. She looked at Ethan and said, "Where is my granddaughter's money?" Ethan set the flowers down on the windowsill. "I am sorry," he said. "I do not know which funds you are referring to." My grandmother said, "Do not insult me and waste your own time in the same sentence." It was the coldest thing I had ever heard spoken at conversational volume. She kept going. "Every month since you married Naomi." $300,000 has gone into an account designated for household use, an account you manage, an account Naomi has apparently never been allowed to independently monitor. So, I am asking you one time, where is it? Ethan finally looked at me, and there was no guilt in his face. There was only computation. He was building exits and ranking them. Things are more complicated than that, he said. There were obligations, timing issues, reinvestment decisions. It was all for the household. I said I was counting grocery money. My voice sounded thin, but it did not shake. I kept going. I was working nights with swollen feet because I thought we could not breathe. I turned down things I needed here because I thought we could not afford them. I walked around carrying your child and feeling guilty every time I wanted something small, and you are standing here telling me it was all for the household. Vivian stepped forward, fast, eager, smoothing. Naomi, sweetheart, you just had a baby. This is not the moment to process financial complexity with a body full of hormones. My grandmother turned to her then. If your name appears anywhere on any of that money, she said, silence would be the wisest choice available to you. Vivian stopped moving. That was when I knew my grandmother already suspected more than stolen access. She suspected participation. My lawyer is on her way, my grandmother said. Naomi and the baby are leaving with me tonight. Ethan said, that is not necessary. My grandmother looked back at him and said, your opinion no longer has logistical value. I went home with her that evening, not with Ethan. Not to the house with the imported marble island, and the carefully arranged pillows, and the pantry Vivian liked to inspect. I went to my grandmother's place in Old Greenwich, where the windows were old and the floorboards creaked and every room smelled faintly of cedar and tea, and the kind of safety I had not realized I was starving for. That first night I sat in the guest room I had slept in since childhood, Lila against my chest, and replayed the last 2 years like a crime scene assembled backwards. The declined card at the baby store. The missing notifications. The perfect answer to every question. The expensive dinners. The constant calm. The way Ethan had trained me to feel childish every time I wanted numbers instead of reassurances. Diane Rourke arrived the next morning, at 8:15. She was 62, narrow-framed, sharp-eyed with a navy suit that looked like it had never once wrinkled in its life. She introduced herself, washed her hands, glanced at Lila, told me she was beautiful, then sat down at the dining table and said, start at the beginning, and do not improve it. So I did. I told her how Ethan and I met, how the joint account started, how the access narrowed, how the side job happened, how the card got declined, how Vivian always seemed to glide in on the same current of money I was not allowed to look at directly. Diane only interrupted to pin down structure. Who suggested the original account? Who controlled the primary login? When did your notifications stop? Did she ever use a secondary card? Was he in the middle of a major raise, acquisition, or capital event? When I finished, she opened a folder thick enough to stun a person. Then she began. Monthly incoming transfers from Whitmore Family Holdings, she said, sliding the first sheet toward me. 30 deposits, all on schedule, all into the household account. My breath slowed down in a strange way. I think part of me still wanted some clerical misunderstanding to appear. A decimal error, a closed account, a frozen transfer, something accidental. Then Diane put down the second sheet. Within 48 to 72 hours of each incoming transfer, significant amounts were routed out, she said, repeatedly. First into Ethan Mercer's personal brokerage account, then into a management company registered in Delaware, Mercer Strategic Advisory. He is the sole controller. I looked at date after date after date. A map of betrayal is a very ugly thing. It has rhythm. Diane turned another page. There is also a secondary benefit stream, she said. Vivian Mercer was an authorized user on a premium card paid from the brokerage side. Hotels, retail, spas, travel, jewelry. A consulting retainer that appears to be fictional. She has not been standing near the theft. She has been feeding from it. That sentence did something to me. Not because I had loved Vivian. I had not. But because I remembered every time she had looked me over and found me lacking. Every time she had implied that Ethan carried more burden because I did not understand the world the way their family did. Every time she had stood in my kitchen wearing something new while I was calculating the price of diapers. I said, they had me living on an allowance inside my own money. Diane said, yes. Then she pulled out the final document. This is the part I would like you to read yourself, she said. It was a transcript from a cloud backup linked to a smart speaker in Vivian's kitchen. The device had been synced to a shared account Ethan had once used on their home network. Diane said the recovery was clean, lawful, and time-stamped. I read the lines once, then again, Vivian said. She still thinks tight means temporary, Ethan said. She trusts process if I say it calmly. Vivian said, she will ask you first before she asks a bank. Ethan said, that is why we keep her tired. Not panicked. Just tired. I stopped there. There are kinds of pain that come with heat. That was not one of them. That pain was cold. Surgical. The kind that leaves you sitting very straight because if you move even a little you might come apart. They did not just count on my trust, they managed it, they budgeted it, they used it like a renewable asset. If the people closest to you were living off your trust before they ever touched your money, would you expose them that second or would you let the evidence finish speaking for you? I let the evidence speak. Diane filed that afternoon. Civil fraud, financial abuse, misappropriation, emergency requests for account preservation and discovery, notice letters to the institutions tied to the transfer chain. And because Ethan had signed an $11 million term sheet with a private capital group 2 weeks earlier, Diane also prepared a concise factual notice for the parties doing diligence on him. My grandmother read the draft and made one change. She crossed out a sentence that used the word unfortunate and said, "Nothing about this was unfortunate. It was engineered." So Diane removed it. The first calls from Ethan started before dinner. "Naomi, please pick up. This is getting distorted. Your grandmother does not understand how these structures work. You are letting someone weaponize a normal marriage." I did not answer any of them. The texts came next. "I was protecting capital. I was trying to build for us. You are jeopardizing Lila's future because you are emotional and exhausted." That one almost made me laugh. Emotional and exhausted. He had spent 2 years designing exactly that condition, and now wanted to use it as evidence against me. Within 3 days, the capital group paused second close. Within 5, they requested expanded disclosures. Within a week, Ethan was calling from unfamiliar numbers because I had blocked the others. Then he made the mistake that ended whatever possibility he had left. A week and a half after the filing, Ethan attended a charity finance dinner in Manhattan. The kind where men spend the first hour pretending the cause matters, and the next 3 hours proving they matter more. He told people I had suffered a severe postpartum episode. He said my grandmother had manipulated me during a vulnerable period. He said I had taken his daughter and spiraled into paranoia over normal financial planning. He picked the wrong room. Someone who had known my grandmother for 30 years was there. So was a woman from the hospital foundation board. So was a managing partner from a firm that had once considered doing business with Whitmore. By the next morning, every word had been relayed back to Diane. She added defamation before lunch. Then she sent a copy of the amended filing to the same people already re-evaluating Ethan as a steward of other people's money. That was the real collapse. The term sheet died first. Then the invitations stopped. Then the carefully maintained ecosystem around Ethan, the dinners, the introductions. The useful handshakes began to thin out. One senior associate left his firm, then another. A family office that had been considering a co-investment withdrew. A lender reviewing a bridge facility requested additional fraud representations, and then went quiet. Reputation in that world is not morality, it is risk management. Ethan had become risk. Vivian tried once. She showed up at my grandmother's gate in a cream coat with sunglasses, and a face arranged into sorrow. My grandmother did not let her inside. She stood on the front step while Vivian spoke about family misunderstanding, stress new motherhood, and preserving dignity. My grandmother listened until Vivian said, "We all want what is best for the baby." Then my grandmother said, "If that were true, you would have left her mother with enough money to buy groceries." The conversation ended there. By the time Lila was 4 months old, the case had become a series of deadlines and affidavits and disclosures. By 6 months, Ethan was not fighting for innocence anymore. He was fighting for reduction, less exposure, less language, less paper, less damage. He left me a voicemail one night at 11:42. He said he had made mistakes. He said he had gotten lost trying to provide. He said pressure had changed him. He said he loved me. He said he hoped someday I would see that none of it had come from malice. That was almost the worst part, the craftsmanship of it. Even his remorse had structure. I saved the voicemail. Not for me, for Lila. One day she may ask what kind of man her father was. If she does, I want her to hear him in his own voice, shaping truth into something that flatters him on the way out. I moved into a small white house 3 streets over from my grandmother's place when Lila was 7 months old. It had a narrow porch, a stubborn front door, and morning light in the kitchen that made even cheap coffee feel ceremonial. I went back to work part-time in development for a medical nonprofit. I opened accounts in my own name. I watched every number myself. The first time I bought a good coat, without asking permission from a voice in my own head. I cried in the parking lot and then laughed at myself for crying. One Saturday morning, my grandmother came over early. Lila was on a blanket in the living room kicking at a stuffed rabbit. We sat with our coffee and watched her make furious little noises at the ceiling fan. After a while, my grandmother said I should have structured it differently. I knew what she meant. Direct transfers, protected trusts, separate control, hard walls. I said, "You thought you were giving me a cushion." She looked at her cup, not at me. "I thought I was giving you freedom," she said. "What I gave the wrong man was access. There are apologies that try to escape blame, and there are apologies that tell the truth even when it does not help. Hers was the second kind." She kept going. I trusted your marriage because you did. Then I let that trust substitute for inspection. You paid for that. I am sorry. My throat tightened. I said I did not see it either. She nodded once. That is why it worked. We sat with that quietly. I do not think about Ethan every day anymore. Healing for me did not arrive as forgiveness. It arrived as reduced frequency, then reduced intensity. Then one morning I realized an entire week had passed, without me hearing his voice in my head when I opened a bill. That felt bigger than revenge. The woman who stood under fluorescent lights counting inventory at 8 months pregnant because she thought she had to save her marriage was not foolish. She was being managed by people who had studied exactly how far they could push without triggering revolt. That matters to me. I need that distinction. Shame tells you that you should have known. Truth says someone built the dark carefully around you. My grandmother was wrong about one thing and right about another. She was wrong to think money alone could protect me. She was right that one decisive call can save a life. Because that was what she did in that hospital room. She did not give me vengeance first. She gave me interruption. She stopped the machine while I still had enough of myself left to walk out. And when I think back to that doorway now, to her looking at my old sweatshirt and my daughter's tiny sleeping face, and the bill turned upside down on the table, I do not remember the humiliation first. I remember the moment the lie ended. That is lighter than people think. If you like smart revenge stories where paperwork hurts more than lies, subscribe and stay with me for the next one.